after me. I'm a man. I'm 40.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Johnny Montalbano. This is episode 46 of Moving the Goalposts. You can follow us across social media at MTGP You can follow on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can follow the Empty the Bench Network, podcast network, across social media at ETB Network. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DMart. You can follow Johnny on Twitter at Montalbano New York, NY. You can listen to this show. You can watch this show and all Empty the Bench shows on youtube.com/ETB Network. You can listen to all Empty the Bench shows on etbpodcast.com. You can listen to Moving the Goalposts wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure to like and subscribe. And this show, Moving the Goalposts, is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. All right, so Johnny is back.
I am, and not much has changed. And not much has changed since I've been back on this show, Nick.
Well,
our two football teams are. I mean, they just hit new lows. It seems like every week. It's like a broken record, right?
Well, I will say both. New York football is so bad right now. I will say though, this is just an observation. I think that, in a weird way, it is better if New York football is bad than if New York baseball is bad. Because at least we have the whole national football to follow, as opposed to if we were in the middle of July and August, where the only thing we have is baseball, and both the baseball teams were really bad. Like being on the radio, if you're on the radio in New York, that all you got to do is talk about a crappy team's pitching rotation and batting order. That would be pretty brutal. Or if that's the only thing there is to follow, that would be pretty brutal. At least we have national football we can care about.
Right. I like perfect example, like this past week, the Giants played on Thanksgiving Day, which, by the way, I took a nap through most of that, fortunately. But I ended up going out.
Were you in like a food coma? Like most of the
yeah. I mean, I eat like an absolute pig on Thanksgiving. I'm in the middle of two Thanksgiving events. I had my family. I was with my family in the afternoon, and then I went over a friend's house at night and pretty much spent the night there. So that's when I took my nap, and I didn't really miss much. But yeah, just going back to what you were saying originally, one thing, if your football team is bad, not every fan can be like this, but for me personally, after I worked Sunday morning, I went home, got all my gear, went back out, and went to my favorite bar that I usually went to and spent about 7 hours there watching the games. And you know what? It was fun to watch those games. So same thing in college football. My college team is not doing well, which, by the way, it is, Notre Dame. But if it's not doing well, I'll still watch 7 hours, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours worth of college football because it's enjoyable. I can't say the same in the middle of summertime with baseball if, the Yankees are, 10 games under 500 in July. I can't do that.
Well, the thing is, sometimes I wish I followed the NFL the way I follow college football. Because, I don't have a team in college football, and I enjoy college football more than any other sport.
Well, I'll tell you why. Because it's the best structured sport of all the sports. I even say this with the four major sports because it's not only the way you play. It's not only you winning. It's the way you win. It's the way you play.
Right.
It's such a short season. I think it's awesome the way it's structured. You can talk about the 12-team playoff maybe being too much or something, but I think I was hesitant about it, but I'm growing into it more and more and liking it more and more.
Well, I think that like a lot of people have criticized college football for not being like other sports. You often heard about it with like college basketball. Like a lot of they're like college basketball has automatic bids and they have 68 teams. I'm just like, if anything, it should be the other way around. If anything, college basketball should try to be more like college football because college football is way more popular than college basketball. And college football is, I would say, the second most popular sport in the country behind the NFL. And the only reason that is because a lot of big cities in the Northeast, like New York, Philly, Boston, college football isn't big at all. Like that's really the only reason why.
Yeah.
I agree with you completely. I would do every sport like that, but it would never work in professional sports. That's the only thing. I think it would be too rife for corruption in professional sports and things like that. It would never happen that way. And I do want to talk a little bit. I do want to talk about the Jets, and I think I've led this show off almost every show since the football season started, talking about the Jets, except last week because they were on a bye.
Which is a win.
Which I guess is a win by Jets standards.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to break down the game because, I mean, I did watch it. I mean, I never watched the games live because I sleep through most of them. But I did watch the game in its entirety on NFL Plus on my phone, which, by the way, I wish I had watching games after they happen, especially a shit show like the Jets Seahawks game, is not enjoyable at all. But I got to do it in order to actually be able to talk about it a little bit. I watch every snap of every Jet game, basically. And I'll say, I guess you could, the way you put it makes sense that our teams always hit new lows. Like being a fan of the Jets or the Giants is kind of like having a best friend who's like a raging alcoholic. Like every weekend you think it can't get any worse. And then the next weekend they're just like, oh, I thought you already hit rock bottom and this is just getting so much worse. You ended up topping yourself. That's what it's like to be a Jet or a Giant fan. I mean, the Jets lost in like the most Jets fashion. They were up 21-7 or 21-6, whatever the score was.
Yeah, it was 21-7.
21-7. And Garrett Wilson was wide open. And look, if we're going to criticize Garrett Wilson for a couple of really crucial drops, like namely the one against the Steelers when it hits his shoulder pad and then ends up then turns into an interception. We got to criticize Rodgers too for missing a wide open Garrett Wilson. I mean, like, look, even like a backup quarterback is supposed to make that throw. We criticize Tommy DeVito for not making that throw, let alone Aaron Rodgers. And then the next play, he throws a pick six up the middle, a pick six to Leonard Williams. Of course, it was to Leonard Williams, a former Jet. It's like, what are the script writers doing?
Well, so just going back to what you were saying in the beginning about how, like, we watch these games even with our teams or watch other football games that we're not fans of just for watching it. Well, one of the reasons why we watch it is when we make our picks every week, and if we do decide to put money on it, which I don't. But when we make our picks, it's like, all right, I have an added interest just because I made a pick. I want to see how well I do. And I took the Jets to win last week, and they're up 21-7, and they're going in for another score to make it. And you're thinking, all right, even at worst, it's going to be 24-7. It's going to be a 3-score game. And you're talking about a 10 to 14-point swing that went the other direction. And that was really the turning point of the whole game because after Leonard Williams, who's a former Jet and Giant, by the way, after he goes to make that pick, he returns that pick six. It's like, all right, now you already feel like the tide is starting to turn. And it sure did because it felt like the Jets were not the same after that. And all the momentum was with the Seahawks. And, of course, the other annoying thing is from both of our teams' perspectives, Leonard Williams making a big play, Julian Love, my former Giant safety, making a great play. On your end, Geno Smith had a rough beginning but had a great second half. And I think that's part of the thing with this game you want to really talk about. The Jets barely had the ball in the second half. What was it, like 12 minutes? I think they had the ball all second half long. So I don't care how good.
I don't know.
I've always said this. I don't care how good your defense is or bad, or just let's say in general how good to great your defense is. If it's out on the field for a long periods of time, it gets exposed. And that's what ended up happening. The Seahawks had the ball the majority of the second half. Geno was able to methodically take his team down and do it against a tired Jet defense, and that's what's going to end up happening. The offense barely was able to stay on the field, and while they dominated the first half, it was a tale of two halves, and that pick six from Leonard Williams was really the turning point. The Jets never recovered from that. Special teams was a big deal in this one. Aaron Rodgers continues to just look completely lost out there, to the point that after this game, there's talk about, are they going to bench him for Tyrod Taylor, which I think is utterly ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, like we said, Nick, 3-9, a new load seems like every week. You don't know what the future of this team is going to be, whether it's going to be with or without Rodgers. And that kind of plays a factor when right now you're sitting sixth in the draft order. I think the rough thing from the Jets side is this team does have some players. They were expected to do really well. And ever since the Rob Saleh firing, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. This guy, Jeff Ulbrich, I understand he's an interim, but my God, he's awful. Whether it's his practices, what he says, the execution out on the field. I think the Jets are going to end up winning a game or two more. And one of the things I thought of with this one was this was going to be like one of those games where I felt like the Jets were going to win, that the fans didn't want them to win, because at this point they wanted to just remain with a high pick. In their position, though, where are you going for a draft? I think the Jets need to get – well, I threw this out to our other Jet fan on the network, Nick Morganson. I truly think the Jets are not going with a young guy at quarterback next year. I think the key for the Jets, I think they got to get a big time head coach in here, whether that's Mike Vrabel. Rex Ryan, when you watch him on TV, is basically auditioning to become a head coach next year. I'm not going down that road.
But why can't we bring? I don't understand why we can't bring Rex Ryan back. He is the best Jets head coach probably of my lifetime, maybe Mangini, but
let me throw out a couple more names though at you real quick. Mike Vrabel. What about Brian Flores?
I don't know.
I like Brian Flores on this team a lot.
The
problem with Rex is sometimes he gets to be too overconfident. He lets his ego get in the way, and if that doesn't come with winning results, then he looks like a fool.
Yeah, it does. Overall, I would rather have Rex Ryan over Brian Flores.
Okay.
I would take Rex Ryan. I'm not really convinced of Brian Flores as a head coach. I'm not saying he was bad with the Dolphins. He wasn't necessarily bad. I'm not saying I don't necessarily think he was great either. I think some of that might be a bit sentimental because I've seen 6 years of Rex Ryan and I miss those years. So that could be part of it also. But Rex Ryan was at least one of the two best Jets head coaches of my lifetime. Like, it's not even really arguable. And I would like to see him. I would take Rex Ryan back. I'm not saying he's absolutely the best answer. I don't know, but he's certainly up there for me. I would certainly consider bringing him back. I mean, at this point, I'd bring back Robert Saleh from 2 months ago. I mean, like, that's how bad this thing is. And firing Saleh was just stupid. In the middle of the season, there were talks of firing Saleh for a long time. But doing it in the middle of the season was just stupid, and the season unraveled from that. Like, sure, Jeff Ulbrich is doing like a really bad job, but I mean, is that really unexpected? Like, or is anybody actually shocked that an interim head coach is doing a really bad job? Yeah, that happens all the time. Like, he doesn't know what he's doing. It's not a shock that he doesn't know what he's doing. Like, it's not like they were able to fire Saleh and bring in a real head coach. They didn't do that, and they probably couldn't have done that. So this whole thing is just ridiculous. It goes to show you how bad the ownership is with the Jets.
There we go. See, now
there it is. Because the thing is, all of these things when it comes to the Jets, when it comes to like the players and the coaches, those are just proximate causes. The ultimate cause is the owner who oversees the whole thing and has oversaw it for decades now.
And is having way too much input on the team the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say that this is all about Aaron Rodgers, but it all traces back to Woody Johnson.
Like, everybody's talking about Rodgers, and part of the problem is Rodgers is not the player that he once was. And frankly, he's like 40 years old and just came off an Achilles injury. That isn't exactly shocking, but there's way more to it than just Aaron Rodgers. People are saying like Aaron Rodgers is the worst thing to happen to the Jets. That is not true.
Oh.
The worst thing to happen to the Jets is probably Woody Johnson. He's the worst thing to happen to the Jets, if anything.
Well, the thing is with Woody Johnson, this has been a repeated thing with him where he's tried to go out and get a big name quarterback.
Yeah.
Now, this one I thought was a little bit different than the times where he went after like Tim Tebow because of the name, or Brett Favre, or elsewise. I really thought that Aaron Rodgers was maybe the missing piece, but it's starting to become more and more like he got Aaron Rodgers just because of the name, and he's trying it from a business perspective. But this has been a problem that Woody's had for years, though, now, and he just can't seem to get over it.
Well, yeah, I think that's true about Tebow, and like the Tebow thing is different because Tim Tebow was a great college quarterback, but he was never that good as an NFL quarterback.
Well, they never got Tim Tebow for football; they got him for business, for name. Yeah. That's what it was.
Yeah, and the thing is, it was like he was a serviceable quarterback at the time, but yeah, that's really the main reason. Whereas with Rodgers and Favre, you can at least argue, like maybe part of the motivation was business, but a big part of it was also like football reasons. Like, look, you have to make big swings sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes you swing and miss. It happens a lot in sports. I guess part of me would rather a situation like this happen where we swing and miss with Aaron Rodgers than strike out looking, as they might say. And I guess that's better. The thing is that like I get that he's like older now, and it was a real risk. However, the Jets were in such a desperate situation. It really made a certain amount of sense to go after Aaron Rodgers. It's really more the fact everything that happened afterwards that was a problem. And also just a lot of bad luck. Like, who's going to think he's going to tear his Achilles? He's going to have that type of injury within like the first 3 snaps as a Jet. And he probably didn't recover from that. He probably didn't recover from that.
You're right. And remember, 2 years before they got him, they won 7 games with bad quarterback play. So yeah, you would have thought that by accident bringing in Rodgers would have at least elevated you to maybe 9 or 10 wins. I thought the risk with bringing Rodgers in was not only just his age, and forget just his ego or what he does off the field. I think the factor was you brought him into a situation where he's never done before. He's never played in a full season in the AFC. He's never played in a division that's been as competitive as it's been the last couple of years in the AFC East. He used to play in the NFC North where, let's be fair, back in the day, he had 4 very favorable games against the Lions and the Bears, who he dominated against. Well, now he came over here and he's had the Bills, he's had the Dolphins, and also facing other quarterbacks in the AFC like Pat Mahomes, Trevor Lawrence, or Lamar Jackson or whatnot. In the AFC is a totally different animal than playing in the NFC North.
Well, in fairness, that's half true. Like there were a lot of years where the Bears were kind of halfway decent and the Lions were very good. I mean, there were some years the Lions were not as good as they are now, but for some years, the Lions were actually a pretty good team, like 8 in some of those seasons when he had to play the Lions. So I wouldn't say it was that easy of a division necessarily.
Well, what I'm saying is that he used to always beat them. No, that he owned the Bears. That was he owned
them, but the Bears were not always. I mean, it depends on the year. Some years the Bears were really bad. Some years the Vikings were really bad. But many years the Vikings and the Lions were very good. Don't forget the Vikings in 2017 went to the NFC Championship game.
Fair.
So and the Lions were fairly good too with Stafford. They were just never better than Rodgers, which I guess part of the reason we thought they weren't so good was because Rodgers just always beat them. And I don't know if the NFC AFC thing is net. I mean, you're right about that when you talk about going up against like say Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he did go up against Josh Allen. That did happen. And he's going to have to do it again. But for the most part, he hasn't played against Mahomes or even really most of the most elite quarterbacks in the NFL. Only Josh Allen once. So he hasn't even gotten to that point yet. And he hasn't played, and we haven't played the Dolphins yet. So
right, you still have to play them twice.
We still have to play them twice.
Yeah, I guess to close this out really quick, and I know we'll be probably bringing this question up a lot in the off season. I'll tell you right now, the off season once the Super Bowl is over and we get into the off season, it is going to be a very busy time, not only for our two teams but around the league in general. What do you think happens with this quarterback position going into next year? Because I truly believe that. I still think this team has some. I don't think there's a rebuild with this team because I think they're too good to be rebuilt. Yeah. They've got pieces in there. They've got the receivers. I think the running back position I think is still good. They still got some guys on the defensive side of the ball. I don't see them going out there and drafting a quarterback. I don't know about a stopgap guy. The one name that I've thought about here in the past couple of weeks, given the situation that he's going into with his team and where they're going to go, is Kirk Cousins.
Interesting.
It's because they drafted Michael Penix 8th overall, maybe building him up to possibly be the guy. I know he's owed a lot of money, and that's maybe the one concern that you have is that he's got a lot of money. But a quarterback like that regard, I'm not thinking of a stopgap guy. I'm thinking more like that could be in play for the Jets next year if they want to try and with this group that they have right now. Because I don't think this team's going to be a rebuilding team. I think that in that regard, you and me are in two totally different situations in that regard.
Yeah, the Giants are in rebuilding mode where the Jets can't, which is why they made so many moves. Like people were criticizing like the Devontae, which I still think was so silly when people were criticizing the Devontae Adams move when they were like, well, he's not going to fix everything. It's like, yeah, nobody's saying he will, but there's really no downside because at this point we kind of have to because we can't rebuild. They're like, oh, you're giving up draft picks. Who cares? The Jets can't draft anyway. Like they're a terrible drafting team anyway. Like there was no real downside to it. I mean, the Kirk Cousins. So Kirk Cousins is still under. The problem is, well, he's under contract for another year with a potential out for the for Cousins. Or is the potential out for the Falcons?
I can look that up really quick. I don't think he's got a no trade clause. I don't think that's the issue, but
because I'm pretty sure with Daniel Jones, the Giants had a potential out after this year or next year.
Right. Yeah. That's why they were able to do that.
So I mean the thing is though is that like if he has a full no trade clause.
Oh, he does. Okay, so then he would have
according to Spot Track.
Then maybe that's not gonna. Well, that's the kind of guy I was thinking of. I know they gave him.
He also has an injury guarantee.
So it's kind of like what they have with the Daniel Jones. That's kind of like the Daniel Jones contract, too.
Yeah, well, he's not a free agent, an unrestricted free agent until 2028. So I guess the potential out is for the Falcons, but I could be wrong about that. That's the only issue is that like the Falcons next year, the Falcons, he's still under contract with the Falcons next year.
All right. So I don't know where they go for quarterback then.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't think you're wrong about that. I just don't know logistically how it would work. And if the Falcons, and if I'm not wrong about that, because if the Falcons have an out, then wouldn't that make him less desirable? Like he would kind of have to not have a good season for them to not want to keep him after 2025.
Yeah. I know he's having a rough go of it lately, but.
And he's only a couple of years younger than Aaron Rodgers.
Right. And he's also coming off of an Achilles.
And he also is very injury prone. So it could be a similar situation.
His own Achilles problem that he had later than Rodgers. Came back very quick from that.
And I mean, he's a little younger, so I guess maybe, but like, I don't know. Like, I'm afraid it would cost a lot of money and could be a similar situation to Rodgers. With Rodgers, like he's just not any long-term answer. But people forget we have Jordan Travis.
Well, and he's coming off of, and he's still recovering from his own injury
but he's young. That's the difference. College.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of Jordan. I mean, maybe learning behind these guys might help him. That might help. but he's coming off of his own injury too that he suffered late last year. Actually, it was right around this time.
Yeah. Well, people forget, though, how good he was in college. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be great in the NFL, but I think that compared to other great college quarterbacks, he seems to be a better fit for the NFL than most of them. Yeah,
and that's something we'll be talking about a lot here as we get into the draft next year with the guys that are coming out.
Yeah, well, it's similar to the thing is like it's similar in a way to the Giants situation, your team, the Giants.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think you can argue what situation was worse? The Giants giving Daniel Jones the contract that they gave him, or the Jets with Aaron Rodgers? Because they're bad in their own type of way,
well,
for different reasons.
I mean, they both were risky, but when you look at what the Giants team, when they gave Daniel Jones the extension, the roster, the team, the way it was shaped up, it was the right move. It just didn't work out. I mean, the line got worse. He got worse, but what ultimately ended up being worse?
I mean, I'm not saying what ended up, because neither of them really worked out.
No,
so it's hard to say.
But I mean, at the time, I think the Giants did it right by extending Jones and only franchising Barkley. I mean, I think if they had to do that all over again, given the rosters that they had at that time, I think that was the right decision.
Yeah. Couldn't you just say the same thing though about the Jets with Aaron Rodgers?
No, and look, and I said this. I mean, ultimately, I think the better fit for the Jets was Derek Carr. But at the time, they were winning. They won 7 games 2 years ago with bad quarterback play. Bringing in Aaron Rodgers, who showed you that he still had something 2 years ago, there was a lot of risk involved. I mean, I understand why they did it, but like you said, when he tears his Achilles 4 plays into his Jet career, then it all goes downhill after that. So the thing with Daniel Jones, though, Nick, is when they gave him that money at the time, the offensive line was great, and they didn't really make that many changes to it. The defense was playing really well, and I thought they did the right thing by extending him and franchising Barkley. And if you remember, there was that opt-out after 2 years, which the Giants obviously used this year.
Yeah.
So both teams took gambles, really. But I thought from the Jets side it made sense, but there was a lot of risk with it. And I thought the way the Giants had handled their situation 2 years ago was right. Of course, neither have panned out.
Yeah, I guess you could put it that way. They weren't unbelievably stupid decisions at the time, is how I would put it. Like they could have been dumber. I would say, but like I said, with the Jets, a lot of it was just bad luck. That's really what it was. A lot of it was just bad luck. I mean, the thing is, what I would have done was, what I think the Giants probably should have done was get Derek Carr. Now, I know they wouldn't have done it at the time, but it probably would have worked out better than re-signing Daniel Jones. I think. I mean, look, the Giants paid Daniel Jones more money than the Saints paid Derek Carr, and I think that probably would have worked out better. And a lot of people are criticizing, attacking the Giants for not re-signing Barkley, as if having a star running back makes you a playoff team or something. Like it's basketball, having one star player.
Yeah,
like the Giants did not make a mistake there at all.
Well, Nick D, I see it's hilarious because everybody thinks now. I mean, I feel like, and I've had this problem with the media for the past several weeks when it comes to the whole Barkley situation. Is first of all, it's not like the Giants never offered him an extension. They offered him, what was it, like $5 million less. And you have to remember, after that year that the Giants made the playoffs, Saquon Barkley only had 2 full seasons in the league. He only played 2 full years because of injuries or whatnot. He had great moments, but he was always getting hurt. And you can't pay a guy like that amount of money if he's going to miss half the time. In fact, I think he missed like half of his career with the Giants due to injury. I mean, it wasn't knocking him for his production on the field, but the problem was he couldn't stay on the field.
But it's not, and that's part of it also. And by the way, he's probably going to get injured again. Like it's probably going to happen again at some point. Like it's working out right now with the Eagles, but the difference is the Eagles can afford to do it because they're one of the best teams in the NFL. They have one of the best offenses. You can't compare that to the Giants who are in rebuilding mode. It would be like if somebody's trying to save up money to buy a house, and then they buy a sports car.
Nick, the thing is, the Eagles have a better team. They have a better offensive line. They have a better system for Saquon Barkley. He would not have been able to do what he's doing in Philadelphia here. But that's what everybody in the media is talking about. I'm seeing, people on SportsCenter. I'm seeing, these beat reporters that are acting like political pundits in terms of how they're like talking about this thing with the Giants. And what they're all trying to do is they're all trying to take cheap shots at the organization, which I think is garbage. Saquon Barkley would not have been able to do what he's doing in Philadelphia if he was on this team. Now, if you want to get on the Giants about something, there is stuff to get on about him. I'm not giving Brian Dable and Joe Schoen a pass here because there are things you can criticize them. But if you want to talk about, if you're trying to take a cheap shot at the organization, if you want to go after the organization, go after them about Xavier McKinney. Nobody talks about what Xavier McKinney is doing with the Green Bay Packers. I know it firsthand because I go to my bar on Sundays, I'm hanging out with a Packers fan. And every week when I'm watching the Packer games, I'm seeing Xavier McKinney have an interception and making his play known. Do you know he has 7 interceptions this year with the Packers? The Giants, that safety cornerback tandem the Giants have 1. That's a bigger problem. Leonard Williams, who is not going to work out with the Giants with a pick 6, Julian Love, that's with the Seahawks. Those kind of guys, if you want to get on the bat, that's fine. But Saquon Barkley is not the guy to be going after because he would be giving the Giants maybe if I want to push it, 2 more wins.
If that, yeah.
If that.
I mean, they'd be in a very similar position anyway.
There would be no difference right now. The Giants season fell apart. If you want to transition here, the Giants season fell apart when my left tackle, my All-Pro left tackle, Andrew Thomas, went out for the season. Because before that, and this is something if you want to praise Daniel Jones here, the Giants had a 5-week stretch where Daniel Jones was playing actually some very competent football, and it was because the same 5 guys on the offensive line had not missed a snap. Once Andrew Thomas went out for the season, that's when the season all fell apart. The offensive line couldn't protect Jones. Jones couldn't, he was running for his life. He could not make any deep throw. He was trying to throw deep. He couldn't get the deep pass. His short passes were awful. Everything fell apart off of that. And then also Kayvon Thibodeau on the defensive side getting hurt. And now it's just come to the point now that the team is 2-10. And I've now not only is the play bad, but now they're losing key players too. Like they lost their rookie tight end Theo Johnson for likely the season, and he had been playing well. Dexter Lawrence, who was one of the better defensive players in football, he's out for the season now. So everything's just falling apart for this team. Even Tommy DeVito finally gets a chance to start and ends up he gets hurt. Can't even last more than 1 start. You have to go to Drew Lock. So, I mean, everything is just falling apart here with the Giants. But for the media members to keep taking shots at the organization about Saquon Barkley, it's absolutely ridiculous.
And it's so I think because the sports media tends to be a bit more overly obsessed with New York teams. I think that has a lot to do with it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, this has been a problem. They've been taking shots at the Giants for years now. I mean, it even goes back to the 2 Super Bowl wins, 2 Super Bowl championships, because the Giants, let's be honest, they were not the best teams when they won those 2 championships. But you know what they did? They got hot at the right time. And I hate to tell you this, in sports, a lot of the time, that's how teams are winning championships now. It's very rare you see that the Chiefs are doing it.
I don't think the best team always wins, to be honest. Sometimes the best team doesn't
only
win.
Sport where I think that actually really happens more often than not is basketball. Yeah. I think in the NBA, because your talent and home court means something more than all these other sports. But, in football, you get hot at the right time, you can make it all the way. In hockey, you get a hot goaltender, make it into the playoffs. He can carry you into the Stanley Cup. In baseball, if your pitching staff gets hot at the right time and you get timely hitting from some guys, that can carry you. But even in the NFL too, like I said, I think the Giants' best year in the 21st century was after Super Bowl 42 when they won 12 games. They got knocked out in the first round. That's that happens. But I think just to keep taking shots at this organization because they didn't re-sign Saquon Barkley is just preposterous.
Well, what you were talking about with Xavier, and nobody's talking about Xavier McKinney, the really interesting thing is nobody's talking about saying the same thing about the Titans with Derrick Henry. Isn't that interesting?
Or the Raiders with Josh Jacobs.
Almost identical. I mean, you look at a team like the Titans, who are also a really bad team. And in fact, I think the Titans and Giants might be the two worst teams in the NFL right now. And Derrick Henry is doing the same thing with the Ravens. And nobody's even talking about that, which I think is so odd.
I'll give you one more, and it also has to do with one of the worst teams in the NFL. Josh Jacobs.
Yeah.
Leaves the Raiders, goes to the Packers. He's excelling out there. The Raiders are 2-10 as well. But, let's just keep talking about Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, it is so odd because all three of those things are so similar. All three of them are so similar. But the Titans and Giants is eerily similar, except I think Derrick Henry was more impactful on the Titans than Saquon Barkley was with the Giants, mainly because Derrick Henry was not as injury prone as Saquon Barkley was when he was with the Titans.
Yeah, and Derrick Henry's been in the league a very, very long time. In fact, I think that's
doesn't feel
amazing.
Like it.
Right? I mean, I think it's amazing what he's doing there with the Ravens. Ironically enough, when you talk about the Ravens for a second, last year the Ravens lost to the Chiefs because they couldn't run the ball despite the stellar defense. This year, it's going to be their defense that's going to let them down and not their running back play.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we'll get into that.
We'll get into that, but so I don't know. I mean, look, as far as the Giants go, I don't really know what else you could say because I'll tell you right now, their best chance to win the rest of the year might be Sunday. They're playing the Saints on Sunday, who, are just they're 4-8. I mean, they're pretty much they got to pretty much run the table just to have a chance. The problem the Giants have what the biggest problem the Giants have on Sunday is?
What?
They're home.
Which, by the way, says a lot about the fans, I'd say.
But it's been a problem for years, though. I don't know what it is. The Giants never win at home. They're so much better on the road or away. I mean, look at their playoff history. Again, when they won those 2 Super Bowls, and I hate to harken back into it, those were all road games they had to play in those rounds in order to.
That happens sometimes. I mean, if you don't remember, the 2014 Cowboys were 4-4 at home and 8-0 on the road.
Yeah.
So that does happen sometimes. Sometimes it works out that way because on your schedule you just play tougher teams at home than you do on the road. That could be the reason too sometimes. But to me it's not saying much about the Giants because they only have 2 wins anyway. It's not like they're killing it on the road and always losing at home. They're losing most of the time anyway.
Yeah, and it's just everything's just falling apart now to the point where when they officially announced that they were benching Daniel Jones and going to Tommy DeVito, they were losing the locker room. Then after they lose to the Bucks, you have guys coming out and saying that they're soft or whatnot. I mean, unfortunately, I like Brian Daboll a lot, but when you start losing the locker room, you may not survive. And
Neighbors was criticizing him to the media, and Brian Daboll took it. He just took it.
Well, I don't want to sound like, being like I'm changing my mind here, but I have been adamant that I think that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll should come back next year. I don't know if that's the case now. If you start losing the locker room over decisions like that, and I thought that was the right, and I was on this show a few weeks back saying that I think they needed to bench Daniel Jones and go to Tommy DeVito just to see what you got. And it seems like when they made that announcement, they were starting to lose the locker room on that, and then they go out there and lay a total dud against the Bucks. And when you start losing the locker room, I mean, unfortunately, that's usually the last straw when it comes to coaches and GMs. And here's the thing: I think if they are going to fire Brian Daboll, then Joe Schoen's got to go along with him because I think this is a situation where you got to go. I think if you're going to start over, you got to start over with a new GM, a new head coach, and a new quarterback. Now, that being said, I still don't think that the Giants quarterback is in the future is in this draft, with the exception of one guy. I do like Cam Ward a lot from Miami. I think he would be the best fit for the Giants of all the quarterbacks that are in this draft. But the thing is, if they end up, let's say, with let's just say, for instance, they end up with the number 1 overall pick, you're not going to take Cam Ward at number 1.
They can trade back.
Well, that's what I would do. I think I would trade back. I think if the Jaguars end up with the number 1 pick, I think they will trade back because they need more pieces. For the Jaguars.
I don't think the Jaguars will end up with the number 1 pick. I think either the Titans or the Giants will.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what. There's a huge game coming up this Sunday to determine that. The Jaguars are playing the Titans on Sunday.
The Titans are actually favored by 2.5. I think I could be wrong.
That line also flipped because of the injury to Trevor Lawrence too.
Yeah.
The Jags actually opened up as a slight favorite, and that line has flipped like 3 points because of the Lawrence injury. The thing is, the Titans though have shown you some signs this year that they'll at least compete and may sneak out a win. This Giant team is just, man, it's so bad.
Yeah, they are.
The thing is too, like when you look
at
a
therapy session, by the way, you're just like, it's so bad. Like it sounds like you're talking about childhood trauma.
Well, it is. I mean, everything's bad right now. There's like no positives. I mean, I like Tyrone Tracy, the running back. Malik Neighbors, I think, is going to be a stud, but they got to get a quarterback to give him the ball. But I think that the other thing too is when you look at the other teams that are still up in this draft, the Giants still have the toughest schedule of anybody, which is right now why they have the number. Technically, right now they do have the number 1 overall pick, despite 3 teams being at 2-10, is because their strength of schedule is still the most challenging. They still have to play the combined winning percentage of the opponents they've got to play is over 500.
Yeah.
The Raiders are not like that. The Jaguars are not like that.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, the Patriots could be back into this conversation because their schedule the rest of the way out is absolutely brutal.
Yeah, although I think
I like the way the Pats have been playing. I mean, if I could
think they're a better team than the Giants, for sure.
I agree.
Yeah.
Drake May's played he had some rough moments, but I think he's played well.
I would say right now the Giants are a bottom 2 team, and the Jets are not bottom 5, but almost there. I'd say they're 6 or 7.
I'd say they're between 6 and 10.
Yeah, something like that. Like I would say right now there are 5 teams that I think are definitely worse than the Jets. I would say the Titans, the Giants, the Patriots, the Jaguars, and
Raiders.
Who?
Raiders?
Yeah, the Raiders. Or I was thinking of somebody. I'm
what about though they look better, the Panthers. Although I actually was hooked into their game Sunday. I don't know if it was because of the trip to Germany or whatnot, but Bryce Young looks like a totally different quarterback.
Way different. And it's weird because they didn't make any change. They just benched him. It's like he's a computer that they had to restart.
Sometimes you need that with these guys.
Yeah, he's looked much better. But I would say those 5 or and then maybe the Raiders are at 6 teams that are worse than that I think are that I'm really convinced are worse than the Jets. I wouldn't put the Browns, and I think the Browns are better than the Jets right now. The Colts beat us, so I'd say 6 or 7 is where I would put the Jets. By the way, I want to talk a little bit about this. Matt Eberflus got fired finally. To me, that was. Probably that might have been worse than anything Jeff Ulbrich ever did this year. That final play of the game. I mean, you're almost beating, I would say, the best. You're in the game against the best team in the NFL in their stadium, and that is just inexcusable. Letting clock mismanagement, losing games because of that, I think is the most inexcusable way to lose games. And people are often saying, some people are saying, well, you got to blame Caleb Williams. I'm just like, look, he's the head coach. He could have called timeout.
He's the coach.
He could have called timeout. He's just standing there. What you do is you call timeout and you yell at your quarterback for not knowing what's going on. That's what you do in that situation.
This team just fell apart after that Hail Mary loss to the Commanders and have just never recovered from that. And Matt Eberflus was coaching. I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to say his name on the air, but let's be honest. Matt Eberflus was Brandon Staley 2.0. That's really what he was. Yeah. But the thing I don't get about this, I mean, look, he had to get fired, but how do you keep the GM, though? How is – like, you're going to have – isn't it kind of weird that the GM gets to stay in all this, though? Well, although he's gotten some players, though. See, they did this totally wrong, the Bears. When they drafted Caleb Williams, they needed a new coach because they knew Matt Eberflus was going to be on the hot seat anyway. So maybe Ryan Poles was not the problem because he's brought in, he was able to get the number 1 pick from the Panthers. He was able to trade up to 9 get 9 for Roma Dunze. So, and they brought in some other pieces here too. So maybe it's not him, but I just think they did this totally wrong with the head coach.
Well, I don't think it's that weird because they did it in the middle of the season. I think that's what. If it was at the end of the season, I'd agree. But I think because they did it in the middle of the season, do they normally also fire the GM in the middle? I mean, the Jets did it, but
the Jets did it on the bye week, but that's a totally different story. No, but maybe my whole point in the bigger picture of this is that Matt Eberflus shouldn't even come back to start the year. I when they announced they were bringing him back, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. They never should have brought him. They never should have brought him.
And I understand they got off to a 4-2 start, but you had to know that at some point they were going to slump because their schedule was torturous.
They're in the toughest division in football.
Yeah, I mean, when the Packers are 8-3 and they're in third place or 9-3, I should say, and they're in third place in the division.
And not to mention how the NFC West is so injury riddled.
Yeah, I mean that division might only take 8 or 9 wins to win this year,
which was supposed to be one of the strongest divisions. I mean, look, I think the Bears have a bright future, and I think that at some point the NFC North, I'm not saying it will end up this way, but the NFC North could end up like the SEC of the NFL, like just a super division.
Yeah, that's what it does feel like. Yeah,
I mean, it might not work out that way. Like I'm just saying, for the way things look right now. Speaking of Trevor Lawrence, the Trevor Lawrence injury, that was as dirty of a hit as I've ever seen that hit.
When you have beat reporters saying that they've been in the league, I mean, there's this one guy that covers, and I forget his name, excuse me, off the top of my head, but he covers the Texans, and he said in like 40 plus years in this game, he's never saw an injury. A dirty hit like that before, a hit as dirty as that before. I saw that in real time, and I just was like, and the crazy thing was, when you see Lawrence first go down like that, the first thing I thought of was Tua. I thought that was exactly like what happened with Tua when in his latest concussion. And, he was able to leave. He left the stadium on his own power, which was a good sign. I don't think there's any point in him playing the rest of the year. But, there's two folds of this. There's the injury, and then there's obviously the suspension, which came out on Tuesday. But, yeah, it was a terrible hit. It was one of the dirtiest hits that I've ever seen in all the years that I've watched this sport.
Yeah. Azeez Al-Shaair is the name.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never heard of him before this.
Well, apparently he's had problems before in terms of like
he's almost like another Ndamukong Suh.
Yeah, and it leads me to that for a second here. I thought he should have gotten the rest of the year. I'm surprised he only got 3 games. Especially when the league comes out and says that he's been a repeat offender and stuff like this.
I think so too. Although something tells me it has a little bit. I don't know this, but something tells me it has something to do with the players' union.
It could. I mean, now granted, he is appealing the suspension, which is not a surprise, but that could have something to do with it. But
I think it's worthy of being suspended the rest of the season.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll tell you right. And if you're from the Jaguars side, there's no point in playing Trevor Lawrence coming back. If you remember, Lawrence had already been dealing with a shoulder issue that they didn't even know he was going to come back this quick from.
Yeah,
and so there even was like talk that he shouldn't have even been playing on Sunday, and then this happens, which is just awful. But yeah, I mean, if I'm the Jaguars here, there's no point in me rushing Lawrence back for the rest of the season. I mean, what's the point? You just can come back and maybe suffering a more severe injury when you're 2-10. You're not going anywhere this year. There'll be a team that will be looking for a new coach as well come off season time, because as much as I like Doug Peterson, this team is just totally lost. I never thought of my wildest dreams.
Wait, he could go to the Jets.
I mean, it's not. I like Doug Peterson. It's not crazy, and that's what I can't believe the Jaguars are this bad. I mean, I really can't. And they're talking about the fact. I forget where I saw this, that if the Jaguars end up with the worst record and end up with the first overall pick, this will be the 3rd time in like 5 years that they ended up with the first pick.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking with Doug Peterson, people forget that he won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles, who was a backup quarterback. Like, he outcoached Bill Belichick. Like, he can't be that bad of a head coach.
Yeah, and Nick, we're only 2 years removed from them going from 3-12 or 3-13 to hosting a wild card round and winning it on a walk-off field goal.
Yeah, so I think the Jets should probably go after him.
I would consider. I mean, I think like I said, I think the Jets need an experienced head coach. I don't think any of this like these guys that were offensive coordinators that want it, or defensive coordinators that want to take the next step. I think you need an experienced guy in there. I actually think Doug Peterson's not a bad idea. That's why I floated out the idea of Rex Ryan, even though I'm not a big fan of it, or a guy like Mike Vrabel.
Right.
Doug Peterson is another one of those names. Like, again, off-season, I'm sure we're going to have a lot of time because we're going to be talking more about the Jets and the Giants in the off-season than we are going to be in the rest of the regular season. Unless, of course, there's something else that happens, which the way this year has been, certainly possible. But, as far as the Jags go, there's no point in playing Trevor Lawrence the rest of the year. You need him to get right. You're paying him a lot of money, and obviously his health is more important. And I think the suspension, honestly, it's not long enough.
Yeah.
Especially when in the statement you tell me that he's a repeat, that, he's had problems before, but you only give him 3 games. If your issue is if you're saying it's because of the players union, well, let them fight that out then.
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably the reason why, because the players union does have a lot of power.
Yeah,
so
it does.
I think that does have a lot to do with it. I do briefly want to talk about this. The Chiefs, they just slid past the Raiders. I was talking to my dad about it, and I was like, you got to take the Raiders because the Chiefs never cover. He's like, the Raiders are just so bad. The Chiefs are – I'm like, no. Until the Chiefs prove me otherwise, I am not taking them to cover the spread against bad teams. And they were lucky to win that game at all against Aiden O'Connell. The thing I have is I saw the play. Where was the illegal shift? That's what I didn't get. Like, where was the shift? Yeah,
no, you're right.
Like, am I wrong about that? I didn't see any illegal shift. It was just a premature snap.
That was one thing, but there's something else that does not get talked about enough with this game Friday afternoon to Friday evening. So Daniel Carlson had missed from 56 and 55 for the Raiders.
Yeah.
There was one moment that it was 4th and 2. If you're Antonio Pierce, you can't tell me you can't get 2 yards.
Yeah.
And and then not only that, so Carlson's missed from 55 and 56. So what does he try and do later on in the game? He puts him out there from 58.
Yeah.
I'm like, and Antonio, and I love Antonio Pierce. Trust me, he was one of my favorite Giants from back in the day. But I'm like, dude, he missed from 55 and 56. How you're going to tell me he's going to hit from 58?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I mean, that's 9 points he left. By the way, I'll just say this as a just talking about kicking. Kicking is going to cost some team a championship this year.
Yeah,
I mean, the way that field goal kicking's been this year, it might cost somebody the Super Bowl. It is not that far of a reach the way that.
But I think part of the reason is because kickers' ranges have gotten so much bigger. Like, not many kickers, even 10 years ago, how many times would people go for field goals from like 55 yards? That would
you very rarely see these guys making in college from that distance.
Well, college kicking is notoriously bad.
But that was the one thing I couldn't take. And by the way, I did take the Chiefs to win to cover that spread.
Yeah, you should have listened to me. I mean, I don't
know. And by the way, let's go back to the Trevor Lawrence thing for a second. That was another bad beat I had last week. I took the Jags the Texans -4. They're up 23-6 with 7 minutes to go, and they can't cover that.
Well, last night I had the Browns plus what was it?
Yeah, you and I both had them plus 5.5. And that was another one, and they were covering until the last, they were covering the whole game until the last 5 minutes.
Yeah. So
I woke up Tuesday morning absolutely disgusted. I went 6-10 against the spread. I mean, I did get lucky. I did take the Cardinals and I did take the Patriots, but man, you want to talk about bad beats galore this week. Oh my God.
Yeah, Denver had no business covering that game. No business covering that. But the crazy, Jameis Winston threw for almost 500 yards. He threw for 497 yards.
Yeah, I put out in the tweet.
2 of them pick sixes.
Well, Nick, the thing was, I put this out on Twitter at Montalbano and Wine Monday night. It was like, and this is how you just shows us that you can't figure this league out. Jameis Winston up against the Bronco defense throws for almost 500 yards. And then, of course, in ways that you can figure out this league, he throws for pick sixes. But, yeah, so, look, as far as the Chiefs go here, look, I don't think they care. They could just do this the rest of the way, get into the playoffs, and, the Chiefs will be the Chiefs. We said this last year with them. We were waiting for them to fall last year. I know a lot of people were thinking that the Ravens were going to be that team to do it last year. I think what this is going to be a timing thing, Nick. And what I mean by that is, as we sit here right now in early December, I think right now. I think the best teams in each conference are the Bills in the AFC and the Lions or the Eagles in the NFC. But that's now. I mean, we still got 2 months of football left to go. Injuries could factor in. The Chiefs could find their form here. And when I mean find their form, start winning pretty convincingly. But, this is not college football. In the NFL, a win is a win. You take it and you move on. I mean, unless you truly are betting on the games, where if you take the Chiefs this whole year, you would be severely in the red.
Yeah, well, maybe they will. But the thing is, people say, well, like the sports media just loves to suck off the Chiefs sometimes. And they say things like, well, they find a way to win. It's like, first of all, I get that that's kind of a skill in and of itself. But you shouldn't have to rely on that when you're playing some of the worst teams in the league. And also, in the game against like the Panthers, for instance, it was more the other way around. They almost found a way to lose. Like they should have been winning that game. They were winning that game convincingly before, and then they almost blew the game. I do want to talk a little bit about, speaking of college football, Ohio State with maybe the worst loss in the history of the program, to be honest. Maybe the worst loss in the history of the program. Starting in like 2020, the whole dynamic flipped. It went from like Ohio State owns Michigan to Michigan owns Ohio State, even when Ohio State is so much better than Michigan. This is the worst blunder Ryan Day has had. It is the worst blunder I've seen from Ohio State. It's even worse than the blunder that they had in 2015 when they lost to Michigan State, which cost them a playoff spot when they were at home and Michigan State was playing their backup quarterback. This is worse than that.
Yeah, because this was one of the bigger mismatches, at least on paper, especially with these two playing each other. What Ohio State was like a 23.5 point favorite?
No, they were like 19.5 points.
Yeah. What did you do when you did it on your show last week?
I took Ohio State. I didn't think it would be close.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with you. The one thing though with that is when you look at Ohio State this year, when you look at the Buckeyes, they don't get off the fast start. So you might have been sweating it in the beginning. You would have thought maybe second half is when they would turn it on. That's what happened again here. They slow start. They led early. Michigan came back. Special teams played a factor, but this was always my one concern with the Buckeyes also this year was their quarterback play. But I mean, that was always my one concern. And
you know what? It's not just the quarterback play. That was a big reason because the Michigan didn't move the ball that much. It was they got the ball in really good field position.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot in that regard to like the Texas-Georgia game from early, the Georgia-Texas game from earlier in the season where the Bulldogs had great field position on a bunch of their drives from turnovers. But obviously the whole talk about this now has been Ryan Day's future there with the Buckeyes, and he has been on the hot seat for years now. It almost reminds me of like what Jim Harbaugh was going through in his early days with Michigan, where he couldn't beat Ohio State or he couldn't win the big game if he made a playoff game. Now you look at the Buckeyes here, and now they have the similar situation. They can't get past the Wolverines, and they have problems in the bowl games themselves. The game against Georgia, what was it, 2 years ago when they lost on that last second missed field goal. But I think they've got to make a deep run here if Ryan Day's going to stay there.
I don't think he's going to get fired over this.
No, and everybody keeps talking about, bring back Urban Meyer, bring back Jim Tressel.
Urban Meyer doesn't want to come back.
No, he's made that clear. Yeah, he's very homerish on the big noon kickoff. We get that. Look, everybody's guilty of that. I mean, Desmond Howard picked Michigan to win the game on game day.
Desmond Howard is probably the worst with that.
A little bit homerish, but this was amazing. There's so many things to this, not only the game itself, but then what happens afterwards.
Yeah, the flag.
Basically last week, rivalry week was taken to a whole new level. Not only here, but
it wasn't just everywhere. This game though. It was across the.
It was unbelievable. Yeah,
the flag planting. My position on flag planting is, I'm generally anti-flag planting. I am. I think it's bad sportsmanship. It is just trying to rub it into the other team for basically no reason other than spite. The only time I'm ever kind of in favor of flag planting is if it's like revenge from the year before, like Baker Mayfield and Ohio State, because Ohio State did it to Oklahoma, and then the next year Oklahoma did it back to them. But for the most part, I'm against it. I support a certain level of sportsmanship and winning graciously, as opposed to just being assholes about it.
Yeah, two things that maybe college football might have to look at after this year is the whole flag pantsing thing, and maybe even the storming of the field, because I mean, eventually somebody's going to get hurt.
Well, I am fine with field storming. I am not I just think that whether it's like running up the score or flag planting and things that teams do just to rub it in, that I'm not for.
Well, the problem's going to be though is like, what is your definition of running up the score going to be? Because the coaches will tell you that they'll put their third stringers in just to get some reps and stuff.
Yeah, well,
and you see that a lot, especially in the beginning of the year.
Well, when I say running up the score, I mean I'm fine with running up the score. Let me be clear. I'm fine with running up the score. What I'm not for is when you can just take a knee and it ends the game and you go for like a touchdown, an extra touchdown. Whereas other than that, even if there's 3 minutes left in the game and it's say third down, and if you don't score here, the other team gets the ball, I'm fine with scoring a touchdown then too. But what James Franklin often does is he often he could take a knee, and when you can just take a knee, what is the point of just trying to run the ball into the end zone just for a bigger just so you win by an even bigger margin than before, when taking a knee just wins you the game?
He did that last week.
I don't get.
Yeah, he did that last week too. He did it again last week.
Well, he did it again last week. It was my view is, if taking a knee wins you the game, then just take the knee. That's it. I don't understand the point of that. Not to mention you're risking injuring your players on a play like that for no reason. I mean, remember, he iced the kicker against Georgia State when he was up 56-0.
Yeah, he's had a long history of it.
Iced the kicker. Are you kidding me? James Franklin, I think, is a good head coach, but he's such an asshole sometimes with this stuff. But yeah, I'm not going to say it should be like Little League where they say, okay, you can't win by too much. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, all I'm saying is, if taking a knee ends the game, then take the knee. That's it. That's all. That's the extent of what I've ever said. I don't understand the point of running up the score. And people say, well, you put the third stringers in. It's well, they put the third stringers in way earlier, and they already had some reps. It's and by the way, Bo Perbula has played a lot anyway. So the whole thing is stupid. The bottom line is, if all you have to do is take a knee to win the game, then just do that. That's it. That's it. As far as the playoff picture goes, it's just I guess it's a bit convoluted, is how I would put it. It's a bit convoluted. I mean, the problem with the 12-team playoff is Ohio State is still in. Ohio State shouldn't be in, but because it's 12 teams.
Well, the thing you're going to have, though, is so Ohio State doesn't get in, but then you're going to start putting 3 lost teams in?
No, I'm not saying Ohio State should be left out of a 12-team playoff. I'm just saying any other year this would not.
No, for sure. They would have been finished. I mean, we would have
I'm not saying they're not a top 12 team. They are a top 12 team. I'm just saying I don't think they should be in the playoffs because I think we just allowed too many teams.
Fair. But that's what happens when you put 12 teams in. I mean, look, what's my favorite college team?
Notre Dame.
Look at them. Any other year, that loss to Northern Illinois would have destroyed them.
Well, actually,
the thing that's saving them right now is the fact that they have the best point differential in CFB. They've had it may not be against the biggest talent, but they're having very convincing wins these last several weeks.
But the thing is, they might end up being a top 4 team this year.
Well, yeah. Now they can't go any higher though in the rank. They can be a top 4 team, but remember they can't finish any higher in the playoff rankings than 5 or 6 because the top 5 Power 5 conferences all get that. So they'll still host the playoff.
But when the playoff was 4 teams, it was not like that.
Right. So the funny thing is going to be is Notre Dame is going to host a game in cold at home where it'll be cold. Who knows? It might be snowing, and they might have a southern school that they might have to fly up there.
Well, I was just thinking, it's let's say Oregon and Texas both win.
Yeah.
If Oregon and Texas both win, if this were if this were like a top 4, like if the old format,
right?
They would be a top 4 team.
Who's that?
They'd probably be 3 or 4 possibly.
Who?
Notre Dame.
No,
not if SMU wins.
No, Nick, Notre Dame would not be in this discussion if we were in a 14 playoff. As much as I love them, that you cannot lose to Northern Illinois and be a top 4 team in college football. That's pretty much what it is. It's the same thing with Alabama. I understand Vanderbilt's played well, but you cannot lose to Vanderbilt and you cannot lose to Oklahoma and think you're
and Alabama's still in the discussion.
They are. Yeah. But that's the thing about the 12-team playoffs is you have a little bit more leeway. If we were in a 14 playoff right now, Bama would not be discussed. Notre Dame would not be discussed. Ohio State would likely not be discussed. Clemson would not be discussed. I mean, but what you have right now with the 12 teams is you have that leeway where those teams can still be in the conversation.
Yeah. I do want to talk about this briefly. What's with this golden at bat thing?
All right. So I wake up Tuesday morning, and one of the first things I see is about Rob Manfred, who, we all know how much on this network that we love Rob Manfred. He recently shared on the Varsity podcast of implementing a golden at-bat rule. Now, what is this? Wait till you hear this, folks, and try not to throw anything if you're watching or listening to this. This is what Manfred said. It's putting your best player out there out of order at a particular point in the game. It's now that rule and things like that are in the conversation only stage right now. So, who has a similar rule in these games? The Savannah Bananas. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but that's like that exhibition. You know what they are? They're basically the Harlem Globetrotters of baseball. But that's fun baseball. This is so dumb, though. So, what he's trying to do? He's trying to have like what we saw in the World Baseball Classic with Shohei Ohtani versus Mike Trout at any given moment. It's so dumb. I mean, why even float this out there? Has there been any commissioner that's destroyed a sport more than Rob Manfred's destroyed baseball? Whether it's been all the rule changes, or not only just that, but it's not on Manfred, but the sport itself has gone through so many drastic changes. Manfred's thrown these rule changes that have absolutely ruined the sport. I wasn't a fan of the pitch clock. It's growing on me a little bit. I hate the shift banning. I think that is
the stupidest one. That reminds me a lot of like people talking about how the NBA. That reminds me a lot of the NBA implementing the hack-a-shack rule.
Yeah. But but why force a team to play defense a certain way? If they want to play a certain way, it's up to the hitters to adjust to that.
Why can't the hitters just hit the other way?
Well, because unfortunately, this is another problem the sport has. These guys are brought up the wrong way, and they have all these analytics and stuff, and they're told to hit the ball with the uppercut or whatnot. I'd rather have a guy that hits over 300 versus a guy that hits 40 home runs and drives in 70 guys. I mean, we could spend 2 hours about this, but this whole golden. So each team could only use the golden batter once. So it's like, and then everybody points to the World Baseball Classic, which is just an enhanced exhibition tournament that happens every 4 years, when Shohei Ohtani struck out Mike Trout to help Japan beat the U.S. Okay, again, that was so overblown too, because that was in an exhibition tournament. Enhanced tournament. That wasn't even a regular season baseball game or a postseason game. And Major League Baseball just came off of a very good postseason, and now we're floating these dumb ideas out. Manfred's trying to grow the game. You know what Manfred's doing is that he's continuing to grow the negative publicity that this sport has, and is continuing to have under his watch. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just. I couldn't agree more with what you just said. Do they remember? I remember they started the. I could be wrong. Do they still have this rule where they have, in the extra innings, they have a guy start on second base?
Yes, but not in the playoffs.
Yeah, but not in the playoffs.
Not in the playoffs, but in the regular season. It's another dumb thing.
Yeah,
there's so many rules that he is. And so many changes that he is now. Not all of it is him, but the majority of the stuff is on him that he's done. That this sport
he's the commissioner.
Good. Yeah, but I mean, also though, I mean, it's not his fault though that the way that these guys, are grown up to hit, or the pitching because of analytics, these guys can't go through third time the order.
Right.
I mean, that's not on him, but but all these rule changes and stuff. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've watched since the COVID year of 2020. I've watched less baseball than I ever have in my life before. I mean, the COVID year completely disgusted me because these guys were not going to play. They wanted their full salaries when the majority of the country was struggling through a pandemic, and these guys wanted their full salary. But all the rule changes, and why even float this out there? If you're not going to do it, why even float it out there?
Because
it's not
trying to feel the public. If politicians do that a lot. They think,
trust me, Rob Manfred should run for office. He's a perfect politician.
Politicians do that a lot. They throw things out there, see how the public reacts, and then see.
Listen, Rob Manfred should run for should be a politician because he's awful.
Well, for somebody who's not a politician, he's extremely unpopular.
I mean, he is the worst commissioner in sports. I will die on a hill on that. Gary Bettman's better. Roger Goodell's the best. I mean, yeah, he's not perfect, but Goodell's the best.
Yeah, I think so too, actually.
I mean, look, I'm not saying he's perfect. He's far from perfect, but he's the best. Gary Bettman's great. Adam Silver is even better than Rob Manfred.
Yeah. All right.
And that's how I'm going to leave it.
Okay. Finally, to end the show, another edition of Unnecessary Wagers.
Yeah, so Nick still hasn't hit one of these because we're still doing them. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's try again.
Lions -3.5. Steelers -6.5. Cardinals -2.5. I still believe in the Cardinals over the Seahawks. Chargers +4 against the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
Saints -5 against the Giants. Over 51 in the Arizona State game.
Right.
In the Penn State-Oregon game, Nick Singleton to rush for 63 or more yards and Dylan Gabriel for 225-plus passing yards. Nate Frazier as an anytime touchdown scorer in the SEC championship game, and Quintravion Wisner as the another anytime touchdown scorer for Texas. Well, and that is $3 to win 1,099. Okay. 1,099 and 10 cents.
I like the creativity of the college picks. The NFL ones, look, I'm not going to criticize you because I suck this year in NFL picks. I went 6-10 last week, and it was a very frustrating 6-10. I am now 93-101 going into week 14.
That's rough.
Yeah, it's been so difficult because a lot of these big time favorites this year are not covering, and some of them are not even winning outright. That's part of it. And then last week, you had a week last week where the average margin of victory was just over 7 points. So that's how difficult it's been.
Yeah. So that's our show this week. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll be back next week. This is Moving the Goalposts.